silent echoes of us. The streets of Nairobi hummed with their usual rhythm, but Aisha barely noticed. The rain had started again, the kind that fell in steady sheets, soaking through clothes and skin, clinging to the city like a whispered secret. She used to love the rain. But now, it only reminded her of him. She pulled her coat tighter around her body as she walked past the familiar cafe on Kimathi Street, her steps slowing involuntarily. Through the misted windows, she saw people huddled inside, warm and safe, lost in quiet conversations. For a moment, she could almost see him, Daniel, sitting in their usual corner, a black coffee in front of him, smirking at her like he always did when she ordered something too sweet. She swallowed the lump in her throat and kept walking. Memories had a cruel way of lingering. It had started so simply. A rainy afternoon, an overcrowded cafe, and a shared table. Aisha hadn't expected him to matter. She had been content with her quiet routine: wake up, go to work, come to Java House, then go home to an apartment that felt too big for just her. But Daniel had a way of slipping past walls people didn't even realize they had built. The first time he sat at her table, they barely spoke beyond pleasantries. The second time, he made her laugh with a dry remark about how Nairobi traffic was designed to break spirits. By the third, he had somehow learned that she hated mornings, that she had a weakness for anything with caramel, and that she secretly wished she had been an artist instead of an architect. He didn't push, didn't try too hard. He just existed beside her, and somehow, that was enough. And then one evening, when she had been too tired to filter her words, she asked him, "Why do you keep showing up?" Daniel took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Because you do." Aisha had no response to that. She just stared at him, feeling something shift inside her. And maybe, just maybe, that was the moment it all began. Love crept up on them in small, quiet ways. It was the way he always made sure she got home safely, even if it was just a simple text, "Tell me when you're home." It was the way she stole his jacket when she was cold, even though she had her own. It was the nights they spent on rooftops, watching the city lights stretch into the horizon, neither of them speaking, because silence felt comfortable with him. She didn't want to fall in love. She had always been wary of things that felt too good. But Daniel made it impossible not to. She saw it in the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world who mattered. She heard it in the way he spoke, in the way his voice softened when he said her name. And before she could stop herself, she had fallen. Hard. But love is never just laughter and stolen kisses. There were shadows, too. Daniel's job was dangerous. As an investigative journalist, he dug into stories people wanted buried. And this time, he had found something bigger than he could handle. "Leave it alone," Aisha pleaded one night, her fingers gripping his wrist. "Daniel, please." "I can't," he said softly. "You promised me you'd be careful." He kissed her forehead. "I am careful." But she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The way he checked his phone too often, the way he tensed at unknown numbers. Something was coming. She could feel it. But she never thought it would take him from her. The night he died, it rained. Aisha had been waiting at the cafe, watching the clock. Daniel had sent her a message that morning, "Meet me at our place. 6 p.m. I have something to tell you." She had been nervous all day, a strange feeling gnawing at her. But he never came. She called. No answer. She texted. Nothing. And then the call came. A cold, unfamiliar voice. "There's been an accident." She didn't remember how she got to the hospital. She just remembered the sterile white walls, the fluorescent lights that buzzed too loudly, and the feeling of her heart tearing apart as she was led to his body. The doctor said his car lost control in the rain. But Aisha knew the truth. The brakes had been tampered with. Someone had silenced him. The love of her life had been taken from her. And there was nothing she could do. Grief wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was the way her apartment felt too empty. The way she reached for her phone to call him before remembering there would be no answer. It was in the way she avoided the cafe, because the thought of sitting there alone was unbearable. People told her time would heal. That she would move on. But how do you move on from a love that never had the chance to grow old? Aisha spent weeks drowning in the memories of them, of the way he held her, the way he whispered her name against her skin, the way he made her feel like she was the safest place he had ever known. She didn't know how to exist in a world where he wasn't. One evening, it rained. She sat by her window, watching the city blur behind the raindrops. She pressed a hand against the cold glass and whispered, "I miss you." And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the wind, she heard him whisper back. Some love stories don't get a happy ending. Some just leave echoes. And Aisha carried his, forever.